This left me unmoved, for I was concerned for the past, and no peering of hypnotized boys into mirrors and ink pools would help me to that. But I recognized Grish Chunder's point of view and sympathized with it. "What a big black brute that was," said Charlie, when I returned to him. "Well, look here, I've just done a poem. Did it instead of playing dominoes after lunch. May I read it?" "Let me read it to myself." "Then you miss the proper expression. Besides, you always make my things sound as if the rhymes were all wrong." "Read it aloud, then. You're like the rest of them." Charlie mouthed me his poem, and it was not much worse than the average of his verses. He had been reading his books faithfully, but he was not pleased when I told him that I preferred my Longfellow undiluted with Charlie. Then we began to go through the MS line by line, Charlie parrying every objection and correction with, "Yes, that may be better, but you don't catch what I'm driving at." Charlie was, in one way at least, very like one kind of poet. There was a pencil scrawl at the back of the paper, and "What's that?" I said. "Oh, that's not poetry at all. Some rot I wrote last night before I went to bed, and it was too much bother to hunt for rhymes, so I made a sort of blank verse instead. Here is Charlie's blank verse. "We pulled for you when the wind was against us and the sails were low. Will you never let us go? We ate bread and onions when you took towns, or ran aboard quickly when you were beaten back by the foe. The captain walked up and down the decks in fair weather singing songs, but we were below. We fainted with our chins on the oars, and you did not see that we were idle, for we still swung to and fro. Will you never let us go? The salt made the oar handles like shark skin. Our knees were cut to the bone with salt cracks. Our hair was stuck to our foreheads, and our lips were cut to our gums. And you whipped us because we could not row. Will you never let us go? But in the little time we shall run out of the portholes as the water runs along the oar blade. And though you tell the others to row after us, you will never catch us till you catch the oar thresh and tie up the winds in the belly of the sail. Oh-ho! Will you never let us go?" What's oar thresh, Charlie?" "The water washed up by the oars. That's the sort of song they might have sung in the galley, you know. Aren't you ever going to finish that story and give me some of the profits?" "It depends on yourself. If you had only told me more about your hero in the first instance, it might have been finished by now. You're so hazy in your notions." "I only want to give you the general notion of it. The knocking about from place to place and the fighting and all that. Can't you fill in the rest yourself? Make the hero save a girl on a pirate ship and marry her, or do something." "You're really a helpful collaborator. I suppose the hero went through some few adventures before he married." "Well, then, make him a very artful card, a low sort of man, a sort of political man who went about making treaties and breaking them, a black-haired chap who hid behind the mast when the fighting began." "But you said the other day that he was red-haired." "I couldn't have. Make him black-haired, of course. You've no imagination." Seeing that I had just discovered the entire principles upon which the half-memory falsely called imagination is based, I felt entitled to laugh, but forbear for the sake of the tale. "You're right. You're the man with the imagination. A black-haired chap in a decked ship," I said. "No, an open ship, like a big boat." This was maddening. "Your ship has been built and designed, closed and decked in. You said so yourself," I protested. No, not that ship. That was open or half-decked because... By Jove, you're right. You made me think of the hero as a red-haired chap. Of course he were red. The ship would have been an open one with painted sails. Surely, I thought, he would remember now that he had served in 2 galleys at least, in a 3-decked Greek one under the black-haired political man, and again in a Viking open sea serpent under the man red as a red bear who went to Markland. The devil prompted me to speak. "Why, of course, Charlie," I said. "I don't know. Are you making fun of me?" The current was broken for the time being. I took up a notebook and pretended to make entries in it. "It's a pleasure to work with an imaginative chap like yourself," I said after a pause. This way you've brought out the character of the hero is the way you brought out the character of the hero is simply wonderful. Do you think so? He answered, with a pleased flush. I often tell myself that there's more to me than than people think. There's enormous amount to you in you. Then you won't let me send an essay on the ways of bank clerks to Titbits and get the guinea prize? That's exactly what I meant, old fellow. Perhaps it would be better to wait a little and go ahead with the galley story. Ah, but I shan't get credit for that. Titbits would publish my name and address if I win. What are you grinning at? They would. I know. Suppose you go for a walk. I want to look through my notes about our story. Now this reprehensible youth who left me, a little hurt and put back, might for aught he or I knew, have been one of the crew of the Argo, had been slave or comrade to Thorin Kalfsen. Therefore, he was deeply interested in guinea competitions. Remembering what Grish Chunder had said, I laughed aloud. The Lords of Life and Death would never allow Charlie Mears to speak with full knowledge of his past, and I must even piece out what he had told me with my own poor inventions, while Charlie wrote of the ways of the balk clerks. I got together and placed on one file all my notes, and the net results were not cheering. I read them a second time. There was nothing that might not have been compiled at second hand from other people's books, except, perhaps, the story of the fight in the harbour. The adventure of a Viking had been written many times before. The history of a Greek galley slave was no new thing. And though I wrote both, who could challenge or confirm the accuracy of my details? I might as well tell a tale of 2,000 years hence. The Lords of Life and Death were as cunning as Grish Chunder had hinted. They would allow nothing to escape that might trouble or make easy the minds of men. Though I was convinced of this, yet I could not leave the tale alone. Exaltation followed reaction, not once, but 20 times in the next few weeks. My moods varied with the March sunlight and flying clouds. By night, or in the beauty of the spring morning, I perceived that I could write that tale and shift continents thereby. In the wet, windy afternoons, I saw that the tale might indeed be written, but would be nothing more than a faked, varnished, sham-rusted piece of Wardour Street work in the end. Then I blessed Charlie in many ways, though it was no fault of his. He seemed to be busy with his prize competitions, and I saw less and less of him as the weeks went by, and the earth cracked and grew ripe to spring, and the buds swelled in their sheaths. He did not care to read or talk of what he had read, and there was a new ring of self-assertion in his voice. I hardly cared to remind him of the galley when we met, but Charlie alluded to it on every occasion, always as a story from which money was to be made.